this morning's talk, come on, I'm trying to get the screen right. This morning talk is on what it means to awaken to the second noble truth. We talked last week about the meaning of awakening as it relates to the first noble truth. Wait a minute, I'm sorry, I'm having problems with this computer today. Okay, there it is. So everything that, I know you heard me say this a million times, but everything the Buddha taught was taught in the context of the Four Noble Truths. And you can look at each truth as a task to accomplish. We talked a little bit about this on our Saturday class. Kevin brought it up. So in other words, the task associated with the first noble truth is to deeply understand dukkha. The task associated with the second noble truth is to understand and abandon your craving and clinging. And that directly relates to right intention, the intention to recognize and abandon what we're craving for and what we're clinging to. And so awakening to the second noble truth in that context is to use the skills of deepening concentration and refined mindfulness to do exactly that, to recognize and abandon craving and clinging. And so often when the Dhamma is explained in the way that I explain it and the way that the Buddha explained it, it seems almost too simple to have any real meaning until you understand the distracting and often debilitating distraction that craving and clinging bring to our lives. And ultimately, of course, the stress or the dukkha, the unsatisfactory experience that we have in our lives, which just continues that distraction. So as it relates to the Four Noble Truths, awakening to the second noble truth is accomplishing that task through the Eightfold Path of recognizing and abandoning craving and clinging. And that brings us to the next two factors. We'll talk a little bit more about this next week. And obviously this is going to be a rather short talk because by necessity, it should be a short talk. We do not want to get into a deep analysis of craving and clinging and how it affects everything in our lives and all the ways that it manifests, because then we can get lost in too much in the details. But the Eightfold Path, and let me add to that a little bit. The details are what a conditioned mind attaches itself to, because the not self-characteristic, the self-referential views that we all have must see itself or establish itself in every thought, word, and idea that occurs, meaning all of the details that are in our lives. So when we start taking an analytical approach or an overly analytical approach to our Dhamma study, we can very easily get lost in the details because that's where our conditioned mind wants to go. It's enough to just hold in mind that the strong intention to recognize and abandon craving and clinging. And so the Buddha developed the Eightfold Path specifically with that in mind, to develop the refined mindfulness so that we can recognize these issues. And in particular, the virtuous factors of the Eightfold Path of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. As we're able to hold those in mind and be aware of the unskillful or wrong aspects of speech, action, and livelihood, to recognize our craving and clinging. That's where we'll show up. That's primarily why they're included as part of the Eightfold Path. And it's not to say that the Buddha was not concerned, or I'm not concerned, or we're not concerned as Dhamma practitioners with moral and ethical issues. But really the deeper meaning of right speech, action, and livelihood is to use those to recognize and abandon craving and clinging. So now I hope I'm explaining this in a way that portraying the holistic and integrative aspect of the entire Eightfold Path. In other words, it works together. And as we start developing the Eightfold Path and integrate it more and more as the framework for our lives, the process, the ongoing process of awakening becomes rather simple and direct. And it truly then does become a path that all of the only real necessity, the only thing to be mindful of is to stay on the path, to hold in mind all of those factors of the Eightfold Path so that we can achieve full human awakening or full human maturity as it relates to the Four Noble Truths and accomplish the task of of experiencing these, and the experience of the cessation of craving and clinging, for most all of us, is a gradual process. In other words, the more grosser aspects of our lives and our behavior are what usually first comes to mind. And just using myself as an example, the grossest aspect in my life of craving and clinging was the fact that I really enjoyed crawling into the bottle of a vodka bottle every day and staying there. That was an extreme example, and it was something that was very obvious, but it was also something that my conditioned thinking, and at that point, where that conditioned thinking developed to was addictive thinking. Where that took me to was a constant negative mindfulness of always thinking of what I needed to be happy. So I'm using that as a very extreme example. As I let go of alcoholism and drug addiction, then I was able to begin to recognize and abandon the somewhat more subtle aspects of craving and clinging, until it gets to the point where the aspects of craving and clinging that we're looking for and recognizing are things that up until that point might have been seen as valuable parts of our behavior. But when we recognize that even wholesome, skillful behavior, when there is clinging and craving attached to it, it becomes a distraction. So someone asked a question last night. I can't remember class, and I can't remember who it was. But leading to the point that as human beings, we have inherently good qualities and inherently not so skillful qualities. And so we're not here to abandon skillful qualities completely. What we're looking for is to abandon our craving and clinging to these skillful qualities, such as compassion, true love, honesty, being able to be mindfully present. We're not abandoning these things, but we're abandoning our attachment and our self-identification to these things. In other words, I'm the most wonderful person in the world. I'm the most compassionate person in the world. Look at all the good that I do in the world. Those are all aspects of a self-referential view that causes stress in our lives. Prior to developing a Dhamma, they might guide our behavior in skillful ways, but because of the craving and clinging associated with them in our minds, they create a disturbance and they create an agitation that can lead to further confusion. So the task of awakening to the second noble truth is recognizing and abandoning craving and clinging. So there's our talk for today. So any questions or comments? And you can all speak up at once, or I'll call on you. Lynn, how about you? That was the first smile I saw. So.
Okay. I think about these things a lot. Not when I meditate, but other times. And I try to figure out, where does this originate, this clinging and craving? How far back does this pattern go? And it's really something we're taught from the very moment that we interact with our parents. I mean, other than mama and daddy, the first words we usually learn are yes,
Yep.
No, good, bad. You know, they're extremes, they're judgments. You know, cookie good, fireplace bad. You know, we do this to teach our children, but we never stop doing that and start to teach them other ways of thinking about the world and reacting to things. It's all like good, bad, yes, no, up, down, black, white. I mean, it's pervasive and it's fast. It happens fast. You can see it with toddlers fighting over toys. I mean, we're taught this madness from the time we're children.
And all of that feeds into conditioning up until the point of birth, you could say, a fresh and clean mind, a mind that is not stained by conditioning. Now, remember that all of that, even at the beginning stages of life, when the Buddha first described dukkha, the first word he used was birth is suffering. And it's because of this and other things associated with human birth. So our conditioning begins at that point of entry into this world. And it will continue until we do something about it, until we're able to have the deepening concentration or refined mindfulness to recognize this process. included in that description that the Buddha gave of dukkha as the first noble truth, that dukkha occurs, there is dukkha in the world, he's including the simple fact of being born in the world creates dukkha. And so our conditioned mind is, okay, what do I do with it now? Here's suffering. A deep understanding of the first noble truth shows that there's nothing we can do about it as far as having the unsatisfying, distracting, disappointing, and even outright suffering experiences, because they're part of the human condition. What we can control and what we can ultimately eliminate is our contribution by reacting to these things, by needing something to be different than it is. So you brought up a very good point too, Lynn, when you're talking about where does it all come from? Well, you could say that all of the condition that a newborn gains comes from the general underlying ignorance of humanity to these Four Noble Truths. Now, of course, if humanity was truly awakened, meaning in that case that our immediate parents, when we were first born, then our minds would be immediately inclined towards seeing things in reality. And without getting into a long discourse of how that might appear, certainly parenting would be different, wouldn't it? Parenting, as parents, we would be much more mindful of the ability to contribute to conditioned thinking to our children, and mindfully abandon that. We would parent in a different way. We wouldn't parent in a way that contributes to the conditioned thinking of our children. But that brings us back to, how do we apply the Dhamma most effectively? We first apply it to ourselves. In other words, I have to awaken before I can have any hope of affecting other people's awakening. As a parent, which I'm not, but if I, as a parent, I must first develop a profound understanding of the Dhamma if I hope to contribute to the lack of conditioning that I would give to my children. So it's such a deep and profound point that you brought up, Lynn, but it all comes back to keeping this process and the Dhamma very simple, because in a very real way, the most significant responsibility that we have as individual human beings is to take to the Dhamma and awaken. So, and you often hear me say the most loving thing I can do for myself and for all sentient beings is to awaken, because then I'm not contributing to my own confusion, delusion, and suffering, and I will not contribute to others anymore either. So, Nada, what do you have to say today? It's good to see you. We missed you the last couple of weeks.
Yes. Things get on top of me over the holidays.
Yeah.
I realized that my reaction to clinging is frustration. So when I see myself getting frustrated, if I can not always catch myself, but I can work on catching myself and thinking, okay, what is it that I'm clinging to? And it's usually because I'm right and someone has done something that's really pissing me off. And I need to step back and say, no, that driver was just not present. And I have to stop myself from cursing at other drivers. And how I do that is I start to grumble and then I say, may you be well, happy, and peaceful today.
Perfect.
So it's the same with like buses or the subway. When they don't come on time, I can catch myself thinking, okay, may the subway be well, happy, and peaceful. This is good. It doesn't need to come when I think it needs to come. It's okay.
Nada, you're describing the process of recognition and abandoning perfectly. That's how it happens in a practical way. We first have developed the ability to recognize when these disturbing mind states arise, and we mindfully abandon the ongoing reaction of screaming out. I spent the good portion of my early driving career with my head out the window and my finger out the window at everyone. If you happen to get too close or weren't going fast enough, I was driving with my head and my finger out the window. It was an unpleasant experience for myself and for everyone around me. But that didn't really end. And I used to feel awful about it, like most of us do. As soon as I calmed down enough to recognize how poor my behavior was, I felt terrible about it. But the fact that I felt terrible about it never stopped it. 5 miles down the road, there I am hanging out the door again. And it really wasn't until I found a way, meaning through the Dhamma, to first recognize what I was doing. Even though I was aware of it, I didn't recognize that I had a choice in the matter. I didn't realize that I could actually stop myself and create a different quality of mind out of a situation that was once, to use your word, a good word, very frustrated. Of course I was frustrated because I needed everything in the world to be different than me and to have my needs met constantly. And that's a tough way to live, but that's, and again, I'm using an extreme example from my own life because my life is a pretty good example of extreme views. But that's what
I
we all
realize
do.
that when I can say, may you be well, happy, and peaceful, I actually end up laughing at myself. So the clinging frustration goes away because I've just realized as you said, like what a jerk I'm being.
Yeah.
Because I'm actually clinging to the fact that it should be one way, my way only. My needs should be met.
And imagine if life was really that way. If my life was exactly that, pardon me?
I send out loving kindness in the midst of my frustration.
Yeah, that's right. We were talking about this again last night about just when you start looking at your behavior in relation to reality. Of course, you have to have a little understanding of what reality might look like, but you realize how absurd your behavior is. It's just really absurd. Why go through all these things when all we're trying to do is to assert the will of an ignorant ego self? And even if we get what we want, this is another aspect of that disappointing nature of human life. Even when we get what we want, it's not good enough. When everybody's off the road and there's nobody to scream at, then I'm just left with what's going on in my mind, and then the road's too bumpy or it's too curvy or it's too long or it's too something else. And you're never satisfied with simply just being a part of your own life. The secret to all of it. Kevin, what do you have to say today? Good to see you.
I really appreciated how you said that this was a very simple talk, and then I guess I'm clinging and craving to find more difficulty in it. So, like you said, the task associated is clinging and craving of, originate stress and mindfully abandoning that. I guess this kind of circles back to, for me, right intention and restraint. Like when we practice restraint, we're abandoning our clinging and craving. If we just have that pause button that you refer to sometimes, maybe that's it for me. I don't know. It's such a simple talk and it's short, but then if I start to think about it, which I shouldn't be, it gets more complex. But I guess it's a piece of the Four Noble Truths. So I guess I can understand it that way.
Oh yeah. Well, a conditioned mind is a very complex, complicated mind, and it's important that you recognize that. The Dhamma is simple in its application, really by necessity. It has to be. If it was much more complicated than originally presented, it may not be a useful Dhamma practice. To me, the more I learn about the Buddha, what he understood and how he taught it, you realize the brilliant mind that this human being had developed. And it's a brilliant mind that can kind of drill down to the simplicity of things, the real root cause. And so he seriously considered, how can I get past the complicated conditioned thinking of all human beings, the common human problem of that? And that's why he developed this very simple eightfold path, precisely to do that, to get past that complicated, complex nature of conditioned thinking and get to the point where we can develop a very simple and peaceful mind resting in equanimity. A mind at peace is a very simple mind, isn't it? It's simply present with what's occurring. It's not caught up in conditioned views that are constantly distracting to the past and to the future and have almost hidden agendas within it. People talk sometimes about developing the Dhamma as like peeling the layer of an onion. Well, it's because we're peeling off the layers of our conditioned thinking. It's not really the Dhamma that is part of that onion. It's our own thinking. the Dhamma itself, again, this is related in using those words, noble truths. The Dhamma itself is very simple, and it's stable. You know, that's another word for noble. You know, that's why it applies. A noble family is a stable family. They hold their power throughout generations. Not so much today, but that's the idea. So something noble is something that is present and stable through all conditions. And in this case, it's through all the different conditions of our mind. So another great points, all three of you. What a great discussion we're having. So maybe I'll ask you this and then we'll finish. Do you see how these tasks associated with the Four Noble Truths and each task of the Eightfold Path, as we accomplish those tasks, we're contributing to the overall development of our own awakening? Is that clear how that develops? And you can all just speak at once.
Yes.
Yep.
Ah, good. So now I'm going to ask you, put you on the spot a little bit.
It's not.
Pardon me, Lynn?
The tasks are not necessarily easy to accomplish. They're easy to understand what you're supposed to do.
Yes.
But accomplishing them is extremely difficult.
That's a great point. That helped me out because I thought about this talk, and the second noble truth is a piece of the Four Noble Truths. So when you think about the third noble truth, the cessation of this process is possible. Then it I got it again. I'm back. It fit in again. This teaching as a standalone teaching is that's where I was getting confused. Why was I viewing it in, just clinging and craving originates dukkha? I mean, that's a pretty broad, profound thing to even think about. But when you piece it together, like you said, John, the Buddha was brilliant in how he did that. This piece of the Four Noble Truths, eventually, there's obviously other teachings off of it, and I'm not doing your job for you, John, but there's more on the second noble truth to come at a later time, I'm sure, when you talk about dependent origination and so on. So I got it. I brought myself back there. So thank you for that, Lynn.
Yeah, and it is. I used to say it more often, but I still say it, that this is a practice of ease and joy, but it's not for the faint of heart. It's going to challenge every one of our beliefs that we hold dear. And if we're going to develop the Dhamma, we're going to have to be willing to let go of those. And that's a difficult thing. And it's difficult because we've created an identity over that. We think this is who I am and the way I see the world. And letting go of even one of those views feels like annihilation. It feels like we're going to die. But really, it's the path to ultimate peace and happiness. When the Buddha described an awakened mind, the quality of that mind is free of clinging. Sometimes you use the word released from clinging, but this is the essence of the Dhamma, letting go of clinging to self-referential views. I mean, that really is, that's the whole practice. Again, it's very simple, but it's also the most challenging thing we can ever do, but it's also the most rewarding. So Nadia, you have anything you'd like to add?
Oh, I agree with Kevin. It said that the pieces, and when they're standalone, and then I sort of fit them in together. It in my head.
Yeah.
It keeps coming back, and I'll do something, and I'll think, oh, it's that, and then it's like I sort of catch myself, and then I can put it all into place. Slowly.
Yeah. Yeah, and things keep popping up. I think it's Tony from Wyoming, one of my students, always referred to it as a game of whack-a-mole. You let go of one, you feel you're done with it, and something else pops up. And that really is the nature of conditioned mind too. It's always throwing things up to grab our attention and continue conditioned thinking. Again, the reason why the Dhamma is presented in such a brilliant way is we need concentration initially to overcome that, to have our mind constantly throwing things up in our way, recognize them, abandon it, come back. And we continue to do this. That concentration that we develop on our cushions is then able to be applied in the rest of our lives. Then it becomes a true 24/7 practice when we've integrated the Eightfold Path into our life. You always hear me say, be very gentle with yourself because of this, because it is very difficult at times. We need to be gentle with ourselves. We need to learn, Diane was saying last night at class, one of the great benefits that she said she achieved is the ability to finally love herself and be gentle with herself. We have to. Who else is going to if we don't start with ourselves? Everything begins with us.
This talk, John, I guess it helped me realize that this is the second and part of a series of 4, I guess. So next week, if we continue and you talk about what I've heard you say is, maybe what you felt the most important of the 3 Noble Truths, that this process can end. And that's such an uplifting. I don't like to pick a favorite of the 4 Noble Truths, but that sure is a good feeling one when you hear that this process can end. Oh, now I get it. Now the second Noble Truth, understanding it fits in a lot better. So I'm sure next week the confusion will subside.
I remember when I first got that, because the first 600 times I read the 3rd Noble Truth, that cessation is possible. I just wanted to get past it. Okay, it's possible. Let's get to the, but to really, it wasn't until I was able to understand even a little bit what impermanence was all about, what Nietzsche was all about, that I realized that if impermanence is both something that contributes to our stress, but it also allows for the cessation of all stress. If things weren't impermanent, if my views were truly permanent, like I'd like to believe, since they are impermanent, I can change them, I can let them go. That is to me, it's my favorite one too, because it allows for the Dhamma. There's 4 truths that the Buddha taught, and it's so important to understand there's 4 truths. If he stopped at just the first 2 truths, dukkha occurs, and it's your craving and clinging that creates it, and that's it. Boy, where did he leave us?
That's where our friend Kandana comes into the story again next at the 3rd Noble Truth.
Yes.
Anakandana.
Yep, anakandana. All conditioned things that arise are subject to cessation. That's it. And that really is it. Until you realize how many layers of the onion skin we have. So, but that also gets back to something I still think about a lot, is how incredibly fortunate we all are that these profound teachings, first presented by a human being 2,600 years ago, are still here in their pure form for us to use and engage with. And I think it's because of their simplicity. Now, obviously, there's a lot that has been adapted to and accommodated to the Buddha's teachings that have changed them drastically. But that basic teaching is so useful and effective in developing exactly what the Buddha set out to do, recognizing and abandoning all causes of stress in our lives and living lives of lasting peace and happiness. And we can all achieve that in a very simple and direct, but sometimes arduous way. So any other questions or comments before we end today's session?
I had an interesting moment where I lost my job before Christmas, and I'm looking for another job, and there's a job going at the Zimbabwean embassy. And as soon as I read it, I thought, oh, I could do that job. And then I realized, is that right? How do they say it? Like right employment?
Right.
If I work.
Livelihood,
Yeah, exactly. And then, so I asked a friend of mine who worked for the South African embassy during the 80s. And she said, well, for her, she thought the same thing, because it was, does she contribute to the apartheid system by working there? Or was she there to make a difference in the job that she was doing? And then I thought even farther, and I realized, okay, as you just said, it's got to do with my conditioned thinking and who I am, and my clinging to the fact that I have to pay my rent. And instead of, the first thing that came up was, oh, I could do that job. And then as I looked at it more, the reason I thought that was because, oh yeah, I have to pay my rent. But if I looked for another job, then it would be more in line with what I stand for, as opposed to supporting the Mugabe regime. So as you said, Kevin, it's things that fall into place as you go through your life. Whack-a-mole. Something comes up, examine it, go on to the next mole.
Yes. And as Dhamma practitioners, we let the Eightfold Path guide our lives and our decisions. And part of that is right intention. So in anything we do, if our intention is pure, and in your case, Natalie, your intention can very easily be seen as working from the inside to affect a very useful and effective change. So there's no situation that is, well, there's probably got to be a few, but in most situations, it's not so cut and dry. It's the intention of individuals that define what the outcome is going to be. You know,
Yeah,
and
very
then the
much
practice.
so.
Pardon me?
Very much so. That, you know, I need to pay my rent. I need a job. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And those are practical aspects of living in the world. When I first came across right livelihood as the third virtuous factor, my first thought was, well, why is this even part of the Eightfold Path? Isn't that covered from between right speech and right action? Aren't I covered in my livelihood? And what I realized from reading some stories in the Pali Canon was that the Buddha recognized that people that would otherwise be practicing right speech or right action, when it was time to put food on the table, would then start compromising those ideals. And so he made a specific point of, you need to look at your livelihood too. You need to bring that into accordance with the rest of the Eightfold Path. So again, getting to your situation, what is your intention? If your intention is to further a brutal regime, well, you're not in accordance with the Eightfold Path. But certainly your intention is to put food on your table and to be a positive factor there. And that is right in accordance with the Eightfold Path. So I hope you get the job and
Thank you.
and do your part as affecting a regime change there too.
Exactly. You know, yeah, it's who I'd meet and who I'd talk to. And it was just, as I said, like Kevin just said, it was, as you go through your life, you find these things, and to be able to catch them and step back and think about all these bits that fit together is quite interesting, because then you realize that that is one less step away from clinging, because it's not just like an instant reaction, that there's a thought process behind it.
Yeah.
So thanks for that.
Yeah, that's just how a sangha is supposed to work. You know, we are fortunate to have this online sangha now too.
Definitely.
Well, what a great class. How about we finish with the Buddha's words on metta? Okay, I'll leave you on screen. Sometimes I take you off, but I'll leave you on screen for this. So you can gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And again, become mindful of the sensation of breathing in your body, and let that mindfulness of your breath cease any distracting thoughts to the past or to the future, or that may have arisen from our talk today. And these are the Buddha's words on metta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class. Peace.
Thank
you.
Do you all know that?
Again.
I know Kevin knows that I'm also streaming the Tuesday and Saturday classes from the center in Frenchtown.
Oh, great. Well, what time your time?
Yeah, so that might be difficult. The Tuesday class is 7:15 p.m.
Oh yeah, no, that's like 1 a.m.
Yeah, and the Saturday morning class. Oh, that might work for you. Saturday morning class is at 8:45 on Saturday morning. So what is that?
2:45 in the afternoon. Okay, good.
Yeah, so it'd be great if you could join then.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and you'll meet our Frenchtown Sangha there too. So
Yeah, with Kevin again.
Kevin's usually there.
Probably see me in the morning on Saturday.
Absolutely. Have a nice
Yeah.
week.
You too. Take care,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. everybody.
Bye.
See you, Kevin. Can't get this screen right there. It is.